It's been weeks since President Biden announced student debt cancellation of between $10,000 and $20,000. And in those weeks since, much of the media has moved on from the topic, but the rest of the student debt crisis remains. And there are many people out there, activists and some elected officials, saying that more needs to be done. But if more is done, what will that actually look like? What are the stakes in this topic? Well, we're gonna be discussing with the National Director of the NAACP's Youth and College Division, Wisdom Cole. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you here. Before we jump into some of what can be done in next steps, which I know you have thoughts on, I'd like to get your overall evaluation of what was done from sort of two perspectives. So one, based on what you might have expected Biden to do, and then overall, how much is being done? How does it compare to the crisis of student debt?
Yeah, seeing cancellation one was just a phenomenal moment, right? Something that for so many people said was impossible, that this would never happen, that seeing this level of cancellation couldn't happen, really proved and said that, hey, cancellation is possible, right? Legally, this can happen, this can impact so many lives, so many borrowers. And so it was phenomenal to see that happen. But the real victory here in this cancellation win was really seeing that $20,000 for those who are Pell Grant recipients, right? We know that approximately 74% of those who are Pell Grant recipients are those who graduated or attend an HBCU, right? Which impacts a significant population of the Black community. And so we are super excited in terms of that, right? In terms of an organizing perspective, we were able to work him up from the initial campaign promise because we were able to share stories. We were able to show data. We were able to empower folks to recognize that more was needed, right? And so the fact that we were able to see cancellation happen at this scale means that cancellation can happen again. And so what I'm hoping to see is that this continues to lead into a future where we see more economic prosperity and seeing cancellation at higher and higher levels. We know this takes time. We know this takes advocacy. We know this takes continuing to have those conversations with our elected officials, but also making sure that we are putting people who are going to further our mission in power, right? We are, almost 40 days away from the midterm elections, and there are going to be a lot of people coming into our community vying for our vote. How are they ensuring that we further cancellation in the future to see cancellation happen at the highest level that will be impactful for all borrowers?
I want to stay on that topic because I can think of a couple of politicians who, especially in the immediate aftermath of the cancellation, had proposals for what more could be done, and perhaps we'll talk about some of those in the future. But you talk about politicians sort of coming to the community and talking to it. Like, have you seen many politicians keeping this topic alive, or does it seem like most, perhaps all, have largely moved on? Do you think that there's gonna be that momentum from inside of DC already, or is it really on activists to get them fired up to do another round?
Yeah, I think what I've been seeing from politicians is making sure that we have a strong education and implementation plan when it comes to cancellation. I'm glad that this news was made, national, and folks were able to hear more about it. But now it's really about how can we implement it so that the most amount of people are able to actually seek relief, right? It's one thing to announce something, but it's one thing to actually make sure that folks are opting into the system, right? There are still barriers, right? It is still an application process. There's still people who are not able to see cancellation if they make over $125,000, right? And so we want to make sure that we are getting out the debt, right? As we're getting out the vote, we are getting out the debt and making sure that people are understanding what it takes to see their debt canceled in the upcoming year, right? There is a certain period of time that people have to fill out this application. And so if we want to see this happen at the highest level, we need to make sure that everybody is aware of what is possible for them when it comes to cancellation of their student debt.
Okay. Before this happened, in the last few years, I know that anytime I would post on social media about student debt cancellation, I would get a couple of people who would respond, well, I already paid mine. Like, it's not fair. And as a person who I had student loan debt, from both college and graduate school, and I was lucky enough that over years I was able to pay it off. That never affected my support for canceling student loan debt, but for many people it seemed to be persuasive. And in the wake of the cancellation, we've seen the the response to the cancellation, pitching it as being unfair, saying that it largely affects doctors and lawyers and things like that, or that why is that money going to these people who went to college rather than to regular Americans or something? How do you respond to the largely the Republican right-wing response to cancellation?
Well, we saw the receipts from the White House when it came to different loans that folks on that side had seen canceled for them, right? And so why is it a problem anytime that we see this happen for the public good, right? Anytime we are seeing some type of cancellation or opportunity to advance communities that have been historically marginalized, historically behind in our economy, right? We need to really rephrase and rethink the way that this cancellation is actually implementing those who carry the most amount of debt, those who are burdened the most with student debt, right? When we really look at the impact that student debt has on people's lives and who's actually taking out the debt, it's Black and brown communities, those who come from the most poorest household, those who are heavily impacted by it. And when I think about what's unfair, really is the rising cost of college that's happened, just over the last decade, right? This is not the same world that we were growing up in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or even thinking about why the cost of college started increasing the moment that Black folks started entering into colleges, forming their own institutions, and being a part of these predominantly white institutions and engaging in this system to further their own future, right? This is an opportunity to right the wrongs of the past and to give people an opportunity to really redefine their future and become homeowners, to become business owners, to participate in this economy, right? This is something that should be celebrated and seen as an opportunity to support folks who were able to have that chance in the first place.
Yeah, and a lot of those arguments about the fairness, try to set student debt as being like a different sort of debt than other debts. Like, it's on you, you chose to do it. Why is your debt worse than debt from starting a business or from buying a home or medical debt or whatever? And it's always seemed to me when I hear those arguments that I think the response from the Democrats should be to continue to work to limit student debt, but also let's start talking about those other forms of debt. Largely, there's a correlation in the people burdened by one are probably going to be burdened by the others as well. So I feel like whatever comes next should probably be, it should feature an overlap, like an understanding of how these things are connected. But I'm curious what you think about what the next steps should be. And also, do you think that, let's say in the 2024 cycle, assuming we do have a contested primary, which we don't know if we will, do you think that another round of cancellation or something having to do with the cost of college is going to be a big part of that?
Yeah, this movement to cancel student debt has been a long process, longer than I've even been in the fight, right? Longer than I was even in college, right? And recognizing that we have to start somewhere, right? When young people were coming up to members of Congress and saying cancel student debt, they were saying that this was impossible, right? People were rallying, they were protesting. People were getting arrested at Sallie Mae because they recognized the impact that student debt cancellation had on the lives and the future of young people in our country. And so now that we've seen this happen, after a decade of advocacy, we have to begin to start somewhere and reimagine the other types of debt that can be canceled, right? There are organizations and groups who have documented the impact that different types of debt have on marginalized community and are actively working to fight to see that happen. I think when we think about 2024, that has to be on the table, right? Because if we are not thinking through the next steps of student debt cancellation or reevaluating the cost of higher education, in the future, we will find ourselves at the same place that we were today, right? This debt is going to rise again. People are going to get back into debt. The more and more people that are encouraged to go to college and to seek a higher education and to improve their lives and to fight for these jobs that may or may not exist are going to fall back into those same traps, right? The truth about the student debt system is that it's predatory, right? And that it is targeting people who don't necessarily have the means to be able to see their way out of that system. And so if we're not consistently having this conversation, if we are not consistently reimagining what education looks like, then we are going to find ourselves in the same place. And that's not what I want to see happen within this country.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think that the media needs to stay focused on that this is not This wasn't even this wasn't even a massive solution to the problem as it stands, but it also doesn't change the circumstances going forward. Finally, I want to ask you about some of the things I've seen since the cancellation that make me a little bit worried about attempts to undercut the benefit that it's had. So I know I've seen some of those who manage the student debt are trying to, in like the last minute, get student debt holders to refinance into private loans that will not be eligible for the cancellation. I know there's at least a couple of states that, despite the fact that it's not going to count towards your taxes federally, they're trying to have it count towards your state taxes. And of course, Republicans are gonna have lawsuits to try to reverse this. If they take over the White House, they in theory could try to do that. Are you at all worried about any of those perhaps undercutting what Biden was able to accomplish?
I think that's where advocacy is important, right? It's important for organizations that have been doing this work on the ground to make sure that we are continually educating our base of people, making sure that folks are aware of their options, aware of their rights, making sure that folks are continually fighting back and working hand in hand with our lawyers, with our advocates, with our organizers to make sure that we get this right. I think there's a lot of distractions that are happening to make people afraid about what is really coming forth, right? This idea that we are dreaming and putting together a better future where more people have an access to our economic system. And so I think for folks who are worried, I think it's really important for people to be as educated as possible, right? Making sure that they are equipping themselves with the knowledge about how to actually see cancellation happen, right? When this application opens up, hopefully next month, we want to see as many people as possible apply. And we want to make sure that we are getting out the word. We want to make sure that the Department of Education is also doing its job in educating as many people as possible about their opportunity to see their debt canceled. I think these distractions that are being put in place, or these ways that are being enacted to fearmonger almost folks from actually seeing that cancellation happen, is going to take away from the real impact that this can have, right? Again, this is going to help us reduce the racial wealth gap. This is going to give people the opportunity to participate in this economic system. And this is going to allow more people to see an equitable future. And so why not allow people to engage in this process, right?
I agree. And I know activists are going to be doing it. We on the Damage Report will try to make sure that people know about these important dates and how to manage the process of applying. And it's especially important because repayment is going to start in just a couple of months. So the cancellation, you need to get that done hopefully before it affects potentially what you could be repaying in the future. So we're going to try to do that. Really appreciate the work that you're doing, both to make sure people know what's going on, but also to advocate for more to be done. So Wisdom Cole, I want to thank you for the work that you do and for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. And if you think you don't qualify, apply anyway. Just keep applying, keep applying. I think it's important for everybody to have a chance, have a shot, apply, make sure you see it through and see that cancellation happen.
It's a great point. It can't hurt. Thank you for that. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.